That's all right. And I'll, it does come with the slightly long.
Nadine, are you in?
That's it. Sorry, I think you needed to join for me to get in. I don't know how that worked. Can you see me?
Yeah, I can't see you, no.
There we go.
Yes.
Right.
Fantastic.
Now, thank goodness. And let me share my screen now.
I did put that other people can join. Cool. Yeah, I did put that other people can join first, but obviously not. So, oh, it's recording automatically, just to let you know.
Wonderful. So good morning, everyone. Apologies for the delay in the start in this. This is technology for you, really. Sometimes it goes well, sometimes it doesn't. My name's Nadine Simon, and I'm currently a senior service designer at 3 Mobile. And that's something I'll tell you about in a little bit more detail later, but I'm going to be first in a series of individuals from 3 who will be representing and talking about sharing our experience with you, our insight, what it means, maybe giving you some CV tips, career tips in terms of your career, and also talking a little bit about the changes that have happened in terms of in the length of time I've been working, right to what's happening now and how it may impact you. So my agenda for today is up for you. We're going to talk about what I've learned, and throughout we'll talk about CV and career tips, etc. I've done a brief introduction into me, but I'll tell you a little bit more about me in some more detail. I'll take you through my school and university, but this is not just going to be about me. It's going to be about school and university in terms of how it's changed and how it impacts you. And you'll see that there's a central theme throughout this. I'm going to be talking a lot about technology and how it changes. I'll take you through my first job, which was at, and everyone go on mute please, which was at Wallasey Career Service and Prospects. Then I'll take you through why I changed, why I decided to come out of education and maybe work in a very different industry. So we'll talk about Y2K, which many of you may not even have heard of. And then finally, we'll talk through the present, i.e. IBM through to 3 at present, and if there are any questions. So this is me. Little photo of me, although I probably don't look like the photo that's on this side. Local girl really, although I've probably spent a lot of my time outside of this area. I went to a local grammar school in Slough. I'm currently working as a senior service designer at 3 Mobile, and until 2 months ago, I was head of service transition and design. What that means is, if you're interested in phones or all the gadgets on phones, there are a number of projects that take place to ensure new services get delivered. My team are responsible for ensuring once those services get delivered, that they're operated properly for our customers. So they will ensure any services that get transitioned through the project delivery have got all the proper requirements so that they can be operated properly. And one example of this would be something like Go Roam, something that is in over 70 countries across the world. I was personally involved in the first delivery of that, Go Roam, making sure that it's operationally fit for purpose. Another very large project that my team's involved with now is probably 5G, and everyone's aware of 5G and all the politics and all the conversations around that. So we're going to be very heavily involved in the delivery of that. As I've got on there, I've probably spent about 18 years between bouncing back and forth between 3 Mobile and Ericsson. I've worked for a number of startups, and on a personal level, I actually try to change my own role every 2 to 3 years. whether it's going horizontally or vertically, it doesn't matter. So we'll talk about that. And then the theme for today, really coming throughout this, I'll be talking an awful lot about the changes that are happening. So when I was at school, a very long time ago, this is how people dressed, and you can tell it's the 1980s. Everything was big: hair, phones, mobiles, and even prior to that, there probably weren't any, there was no technology at all. So that when I was at school, we didn't have computer science lessons. I think there was one GCSE class and only 5 people attended it. And you can see how technology has changed. I think if we've got a number of young people on the line, if you reflect back and you speak to your own parents and you ask them how it was for them then compared to how it is now, they'll probably tell you they didn't have their own personal mobile phone. Everyone had what we've got, one of those, a generic phone that everyone in the family used. If they did have internet access, it was dial-up. And I'll explain what that means. It means basically you had a buzz in the phone and then you got charged per minute. If you wanted to talk to your friends, you either had to ask your parents if you could use the phone or you went out to meet them. There was no Nintendo and all these other wonderful things that we have now. And certainly things like social media did not exist back then. So we were plain old boring and we made our own entertainment. And as I keep saying, and I'll keep on repeating it, the last 20, 30 years, I think technology has played a major part in terms of our school, education generally, and certainly within the workplace. Because in the 1980s, when I was at school, most people didn't use computers. Shops, most people worked in shops. If you worked in an office, it was very much paper-based. And if you look at a lot of offices now, they don't use as much papers. I've got a pen in my hand. Most people don't use pens anymore. They tend to type everything out. So what I'm trying to do and demonstrate is, I don't just want to talk about my own experience. I think what I'm trying to share with you is, even in the time that I've been working, how things have changed and moved so rapidly that probably in 20, 30 years time, because I'm an old timer, I certainly won't be working, things will move and change within your work experience and within your lifetime. And you've got to be prepared for those changes and prepared to actually be doing things very differently. And a prime example of this is the big mobile phones we've got over there. We used to have people called yuppies when I was a kid, and they would hold those mobile phones in their hand, and very few people had them, and they'd shout down the phones. Now everyone has phones. So you can see how technology has moved. You can see how you can actually apply for a job on a phone now, whereas in the past you weren't able to. So that's the one thing I want to take you through. So then we move on to the next phase in my life. And this was university. And I think I really want to talk to you a little bit about what I learned and developed in school. So from school, I developed some transferable skills. I think I developed life skills because I got a job at 15. I developed my independence because my parents made me do chores around the house. And so for those of you who are going, I don't like doing chores, it teaches you about being independent. Having a job, if you have one, it teaches you the value of money. And also when I was at school, I was able to, and this developed further at university, speak in front of a lot of people. So when I went to university, I went to Brighton. I went to Brighton not because it was the best university in the world, because the technology that you have now to look through and ascertain which are the best universities and why, for which courses, they weren't available when I was at school. If you wanted to know about a university, you would have to open a big book called a UCAS or a PCAS book, and all the information was within that book, and it told you a little bit more about the universities, but you can't compare and contrast with a book. And so that shows you how technology has changed. And at Brighton, I really enjoyed it. I decided I was going to do a course that I enjoyed doing rather than a course that would help me with an end career. So I did a course in social science, and although it's not linked to anything that I'm doing at the moment, what it did teach me were certain transferable skills. So one of the skills it taught me was the ability to actually talk in front of people. As part of my course, we would do a number of sessions where we had to lecture other people in the class on certain elements that we were talking about. And we would have to stand in front of a group of about 30 people, because we were subdivided, pick a subject, do research on it, and then feed that back to the rest of the class. That's an invaluable lesson to learn, especially those who are a little bit more quiet and more timid, because what that teaches you is confidence. In most jobs nowadays, you'll be asked to do a presentation, especially if you want to move up in the world. It teaches you focus. And within that time, you need to ensure that you get it right for your audience. So they're just some of the skills I learned at university, but I learned other things. At university, unlike school, there was an array of individuals from a multitude of different environments and a diverse mixture of people. At school, although it was diverse, people tended to come from the same sort of area and share the same ideals. At university, I got the opportunity to meet with a plethora of people and listen to their ideals. I might not have always agreed with them, but it's about understanding people, tolerating their opinions, and respecting where they come from and why they think the way they do without questioning it, but don't think it's unreasonable for someone to have a different point of view. And I learned all those skills which really have helped me in my current life, because in a work environment, you're never going to agree with all the people all the time. You're never going to like all the people all the time, and you're never going to get on with all the people all the time, but that's okay. What's more important is respecting that individual and actually learning the value from them. And that's something that I certainly learned in terms of from university. It was really important for me. Anyway, after I left university, I did something which is quite normal now, but at the time was quite uncommon. I took a gap year. And what we're talking about the 1990s now, where people didn't really travel as much as they do now. And I took a year traveling around Southeast Asia, Australia, and America and New Zealand. And it was a fantastic experience for me. And although some of the countries I'd already been to before, I was quite lucky. For me, it was about experiencing the culture, because when you go somewhere for 2 weeks on a holiday, you normally have a very set environment in terms of where you're living. When you're backpacking and you have no exact place to stay, or you don't know what you're going to be doing day to day, it really does challenge you. And I learned certain other skills, certainly transferable skills, that have helped me in the workplace. I learned to socialize, something that I personally, it's not something that I find easy, but I had to get to know people very quickly and in a short period of time. I learned about different cultures and nationalities. I learned that we weren't all the same, but it's okay for us to be different. I learned to negotiate, and often in very short periods of time. And often you would meet someone for one day, and within that period, you would know more about that individual than often people I'd been at home and known for years about, because people tend to open up when they're in an environment where they're challenged, where they don't have the opportunity to hide and form little cliques of how in the way they would in a normal environment. And so challenging me and taking me out of my normal environment was really good. But the other thing I did, as well as traveling, I actually worked in a number of the countries. So I worked in Australia for about 4 or 5 months. I worked in New Zealand for a month, and I worked in Indonesia as well. the jobs I did at the time weren't that substantial. It was working in shops or cleaning hostels or working in an ice cream parlour in Manly, which was fantastic. But what it did, it really taught me about different environments, how people learn, how people socialise. And within myself, I think I learned an awful lot of confidence. And I think that's really important. So after my year abroad, I came back and I thought, what am I going to do now? All these skills I've acquired, still the technology wasn't there, but I had used the laptop before. What am I going to do now? And I thought, you know what, I'm going to do a postgrad study. And I went back to university and I did a year's course because at first I thought I wanted to be a teacher. And then I thought, no, maybe I want to do something slightly different. So I went back to the University of the West of England, as it's now known, and I did a year's course and I trained to be a careers advisor. And I worked as a careers advisor for multiple years, but that course was it was fantastic because it taught me about certain things that I'm actually learning about right now. It taught me about things like unconscious bias. It taught me about understanding children at different stages in their life and their psychology and the technology that sits behind that. But most importantly, it taught me to not be too quick to pass judgment on others. And the reason being because who you are at 16 doesn't mean that's who you're going to be at 36, unless that's what you decide to do. But in my inner thoughts at that point that was really the point I started to focus. Not so much on my career, because I don't think I've ever been a career-driven person, although we're all very different, but it taught me to focus on what was important for me. And when choosing a career or anything that you do, you need to think about money. People think it's always the first thing they think of, but it's more than money. You need to think about what is important to you. Do you enjoy being around people? Do you enjoy technology? If you enjoy being around people, is it in large groups, small groups? Would you be happy presenting on a stage? Would you be more comfortable being in the background? Do you prefer working in a team or maybe on your own? All these things are really important. Do you like being autonomous, i.e. just doing things on your own and then delivering into others, or being part of something bigger? These are the key questions to ask. And most people say, I want to be a doctor or I want to be a lawyer. But what I would say is, if that's what you want to be, that's fine. But you need to look at the qualifications and also the key skills. But most important, if that's what you want to do, you need to have the determination to ensure that whatever you do, you change and you enable yourself to adapt and reflect back on that. So let's move on a little bit, shall we? I finished the course and I moved on to my first job. I got my first job in Wallasey Career Service. Wallasey is part of the Wirral, so it's near Liverpool, and I actually lived in Liverpool, and I chose that area specifically because I hadn't lived in the north before and I knew very little about it. And you'll start to see a theme throughout my life. I tend to travel a lot. I tend to live in different parts of both in England, because you'll see from the universities, they weren't near where I grew up. And it's because every time I live somewhere different, I meet new people and I learn and I discover more about myself. So with Wirral Career Service, that was my first job as a careers advisor, although I had jobs from the age of 15, as I said before, but that was my first proper job. Probably one of the most enjoyable jobs I had, partly due to the people, but also because of the environment I was in. I got to advise kids from the age of 13 right through to 18 on multitude of things, right through from giving individual careers advice, through to talking them through which universities they were going to attend and why. And although at the time I was only about 5 or 6 years older than them, just in that period of 6 years, I could see how things had changed for me. When I was at school, we didn't have careers fairs. At that point, they started to have careers fairs. You started to visit universities. Things started to be more online. And certainly things like clearing, and I'll explain to you what that means, for those who want to maybe change their career, or sorry, who want to go to a different university or haven't been successful in attaining a place at university, there's something called clearing. And clearing allows you to swap from one place to another. When I was at school, if you wanted to go through clearing, you needed to go into the career service, book an appointment with a careers advisor prior to your exams coming out, results coming out, to determine whether or not you'd get an opportunity. And the careers advisor would be the one physically phoning up the university themselves. If I hark back to where we are now, last year my daughter went to university and she decided she wanted to change from going to Nottingham to go to Warwick. And what she did, she got her results, came home and phoned the university direct, and then had a conversation with them and transferred straight into them. And that shows you how technology has progressed and how we have progressed over time. But I digress a little bit. Back to the conversation that I had about the career service. Why did I enjoy my first career? Well, for a number of reasons. It was fun. I loved working with kids in school because you're all very different in terms of your notions, your outlook, and what you believe. People were genuine towards each other, and it's the sort of profession that you actually go in to help each other rather than just going into it for the money. And when you're in a profession where you're helping each other, there's a sense of feeling good about yourself, if you like. So for me as a first career, it was safe. I was always supported during that first probationary year. I felt that I had people to talk to, although I was hundreds of miles away from home. And more importantly, the schools that they put me in the Wirral were so friendly. I got so many thank you cards. The kids would pop in on lunchtime just to talk to me, just to have a chat, because I was kind of their age group. And it was really good to find out about someone for them who had grown up in a very different environment, hundreds of miles away. Often some of them hadn't even been to London before. So from that perspective, it was really good to exchange information with them and talk to them about it. And I think what I found important is we can learn from everyone. Even in that job, there were a couple of kids, and that was a very long time ago, over 25 years ago. There were a couple of kids that I advised back then that even to this day, they still stick in my mind. I still recall the conversations I had with them and the reasons why. And I learned a lot because within the Wirral, you had a high proportion of the kids who came from families that were normally army families, families that were part of the forces. And I hadn't experienced that before. And I certainly learned a lot from that in terms of the families, generation after generation going into the army, what were their insight into why they did it and why they wanted to do that. So for me, I thought it was really important. I learned a lot. I enjoyed it. But after a year, I thought, I want to come back to London, actually. I want to learn a little bit more. So I moved from the Wirral Career Service and I joined what was then Croydon Career Service as a fully fledged careers advisor. And I was quite lucky in the sense that I was there on a temporary contract. So for my first year in that contract, they put me to work with people, adults, unemployed adults, something that I hadn't dealt with before, advising them, giving them long-term advice about how they return to the workplace. And that was the first time I had to do my own research on CVs, CV preparation, and I'll talk to you about that a little later, what that meant, what that looked like. And to advise people who were often, I was still in my early 20s, who were at the age I am now, and a lot of them had been unemployed for about 4 or 5 years. It was a little bit disheartening, but actually at the end of it, if you went out of there and you took them, because we did job boards as well, if you took them in and you took them on the job board and you talked them through roles that might be appropriate for them, and then you started to talk to them about what skills they had, and they would say, well, I don't have any skills. And most people, their natural disposition is to say, I can't, or I won't, or I haven't. And actually, if you ask yourself a few key questions, have you been involved in any clubs before? I bet most of you will say yes. What skills did you learn from that? Think about it. Have you been involved in DOE before? Some of you may say, yes, or I'm thinking of it. What skills did you learn from that? How can you transfer those skills, whether it be into university, application, or a job application later on? And these are the skills that I started to develop myself, but actually to start advising other people at the time as well, which was really important. And from there I moved on. They said, we'll keep you on, you're not bad. We'll keep you on, although you're a little younger than the rest of us, but we'll put you back in a school. And they put me in. Have any of you heard of the Brit School? So my next role within Croydon was to actually be the careers advisor in the Brit School. I knew absolutely nothing about entertainment. I just had these visions of, there was a program on when I was, remember I'm an old timer. So there was a program on when I was at school called Fame. And I had this vision of these kids dancing down the corridors and running and singing. And it wasn't like that at all, actually. Some of them had to do some serious work on top. Now, many of you will have heard of the Brit School. You will have heard of the likes of Adele and numerous others people who've come out of the Brit School and now have become really famous and successful. Well, when I was at the Brit School, I don't think they could name many people who were successful and famous at the time, and when I was the careers advisor in there. But nevertheless, again, it was another growth environment. I learned about the arts for the first time, not just about the arts such as popular music, etc. I learned more about jazz, I learned about opera, I learned about ballet, just by conversing with the teachers and asking the kids about their aspirations. And for me, whoever you encounter in your life, whether they're older than you or younger than you can learn a lot about other people, but also they can learn a lot about you as well. So for me, that was quite enjoyable. And then after a year of doing that, I thought, you know what, put me back in a mainstream school again. And I went in mainstream school, and most of the kids in the school that I was in, which was a technology college, it had just become a technology college. Most of them were, one school was very high academic, and they all went to university. And the other one was a mixed bag. And I learned a lot about that. And then they said, you know what, we're going to put another string to your bow. So I trained up to be a psychometric tester. And what that means is, it gives you the opportunity to do a number of tests on people to decide what their aptitudes are, i.e. what they're good at. And you can test long-term aptitude, short-term aptitude, things they do well, things they don't. And these psychometric tests are often used in a lot of work environments to test people's aptitude. Is this the right environment for them? And that's another thing about work and working in the careers service. I learned for the first time in my life to think about, is this the right environment for me? Should I be doing other things? I learned about unconscious bias. Unconscious bias has become a key word at the moment because of the Black Lives Matters movement, the Pride movement, gender equality, which have all come to the fore at the moment, although a lot of these battles, as I call them, really started in the 1960s before most of us, even me, was born. But nevertheless, it's come to the forefront again. And that word unconscious unbiased comes up time and time again. I just want to say a couple of words about it. it's really important. Unconscious bias is when you make assumptions about someone based on either the gender, the colour of their skin, how they speak, where they're from, without getting what I call under the hood. Because people will surprise you. It's very easy to make stereotypes. And what I learned as a careers advisor was, don't make stereotypes about people, because they will often surprise you with what they're interested in, with what they enjoy, with what they do, and you'll learn an awful lot about them. And I'd say to you, throughout your career, and a number of you may become employers, please be very conscious of that person sitting in front of you and what it means for them. And remember what it's like to kind of be interviewed yourself once you get to that stage. So let's move on from there, because I don't just want to talk about me. I want to talk a little bit about you. So I've put this very quickly together. 3 key areas, and to maybe assist some of you moving forward. Job applications, and I've called it a little bit now and then. So I'm going to talk about 3 key areas: job applications, CVs, and how they've all changed. In my time, a long time ago, you wrote a job application out, and it was laborious, and it was done in chronological order, i.e. from school right through to last employment. And we still have job applications, especially for what I call traditional industries. And they're still used very much today. However, they are dying a death. So some of you may not experience as many, certainly job or employment applications, as I have in my lifetime, or even your parents, as things progress and move on. We move on. About 20 years ago, they were always popular, but about 20 years ago, CVs or curriculum vitae became important. And people, when they first started doing CVs, it would be a one-pager. They certainly didn't have a wonderful photograph of themselves on it. And the one-pager would state name, gender, date of birth. You'd write your education history, and then you'd write a little bit about your job history. Not too much, but just a little bit on there. And then at the end, you would think, oh, I'll apply for something, and you'd physically deliver your CV, because you couldn't upload it. Not until about 25 years ago, you couldn't upload it. And then you physically go around and deliver your CV from shop to shop, from factory to factory, from different agency, or you would send it, you would physically send it in to hope that they maybe had a role that was available. Nowadays, it's not like that. Your CV is a further representation of who you are. And CVs have really evolved, and that's what this is about in terms of jobs. The CV now, most people are expected to have a photograph on there. Now, old timers like me, and Jill will laugh, Jill is a representative who'll be giving probably a talk in a few months' time, will laugh at me. I never put my photograph on anything. It's because I'm old, and the older you are, the more difficult it is to change. But I'm going to tell you, don't do as I do, do as I say. Please put your photograph on your CV. It's really important that they have a bright, sparkly photograph of you. Within your CV, things like gender, age, you don't put that on there anymore. We have moved on leaps and bounds. They want your name, they want your email address, and if you've got a LinkedIn profile, put it on there. And some places will ask for other social media profiles, such as Facebook, Snapchat, etc. But be wary. If you put a profile on there like that, ensure that employer will be looking at you. And if you've put in anything stupid or silly on your Facebook page, you don't want a prospective employer to get the wrong ideas around you. So be very wary of that. And then the other slight tip I've put on here is this. With your CV, your CV should be star-based. You should talk about, when you're writing about something, a situation, a task, an action, and a result. The situation is what you did, what happened, sorry. The task is what you did. The action is what was your involvement in that, and then the results, either what you learned from that or how you helped other people. And then finally, we zoom into the age we're in now. A number of, especially tech companies, have moved away, have dismissed the application form and even the CV, and they want the CV via a video. So not just video interviews, but they want a video CV. So there are new platforms like Shine and Higher View, and there are some other even newer ones that are actually asking people to give about 2 or 3 minute segment of themselves via a video, which then gets uploaded, and certain high-tech organizations will have us scan through them and decide, yeah, that's the right person for me. This is the platform. And therefore, all the skills that I learned when I was at school and university in terms of speaking in front of others have really come in handy for that. So my tip to you is make sure that those skills that you've got have evolved. Now, from the jobs, and I've only got a few minutes left, I want to quickly move on to interviews because I wanted to give you a few tips. Because as I said back here, if you can see my screen, I said way back when I started, an application form was written in a chronological order. And therefore, when you applied for a job, the questions that you were asked were open and closed questions, very much pertaining to that. Well, things have moved on from there. Now, many interviews, even interviews for standard basic entry jobs, are competence-based. What that means is they want to know more about you. So if you go for an interview, they will ask you open questions as opposed to closed questions. And let me give you an example, but you probably know this already. An open question is, tell me a little bit about yourself. It gives you the opportunity to expand. A closed question will be a yes or no answer. Do you live near here? You can expand on it, but normally it would be yes or no, because it would normally be in a 5 or 10 mile radius. But interviews are now moving towards that more open, competence-based format. So tell me about a time when you did X, Y, and Z. What did you learn from the experience doing D&V or working in that environment or that course you did from school? What do you know about this organization or this course? They expect you to do some research for the interview. What do you think you can bring to this organization and course? Most of us, when we think about roles or jobs or anything like that, we always think about the benefit to us. We never actually stop about and think about what is the benefit to the organization? Why should they employ me? Any interview or course you're applying for, why should they employ you? Another question will be maybe, where do you see yourself in 2, 4, or 5 years' time? That doesn't necessarily mean you have to say, I want to be CEO or I want to be making a lot of money. Your response to that could possibly be, I would like to be in an environment or in a job where I'm learning, I'm growing, I'm developing. And finally, I'm bringing that word star again. Please, I had a video I was going to play, but I haven't got time today. Please have a look up what star means. Situation, action, result. There are a number of really good short videos on YouTube for about 3 or 4 or 5 minutes that take you through the star method. I would say to anyone at any level, before you have an interview, please go and look up and learn what star means. it will really help you, because it will help structure your questions, your answers, whether it be for a CV or an interview itself. So finally, I decided, after working in the career service, to give myself some careers advice. There was something called Y2K, and I'll go through this very quickly, and that was year 2000. And at the time, we all believed, and many of you were probably not even born, we all believed that the world was going to come to an end, and that systems would crash, and that there would be a millennium bug that wouldn't enable us to go from the 31st of December 1999 until into the 1st of January 2000. And that was what we call the Y2K glitch. In the end, it didn't happen, but I decided I was going to give myself some careers advice and retrain, and that I did. And as a consequence, I ended up doing a course, an IT course, and then another IT course. I won't go into them now in more detail. And I ended up getting a job in IBM. And I got a job as an analyst. And from there, I got 2P'd in, or I got transferred in to AT&T. And then I decided I was going to work for a few startup companies, because I was an IP engineer. So it's that technology person that bands one area of it together to another area. And then I thought, I think I'll go and work for a couple of startups. And that's what I did. I went and worked in Holland for a startup called Interaction. And then I got made redundant. I lost my job. And I thought, what am I going to do now? I've got a little baby. I need a steady job. So I applied for a job in this new startup company called 3. And I worked for a number of years as an engineer. So all those things, the applications you see on your phone at the moment, BBC websites, once upon a time, they actually needed someone to physically put that information on the website and support the applications. And that was my job. I did that 24/7, working in a team to ensure that everything was fit for purpose. And then I moved and progressed and started up the ladder and started managing people, etc. And then I moved into Ericsson, and I'm back in 3 again. My point is, and I think this is where I want to end because I'm running out of time here, I'm now recruiting a number of people. What I look for is people who have what I call transferrable skills. People who've got something to say about themselves. Even people who work for me or people who work for them are expected to give presentations. They're expected to have what I call good stakeholder management, to work with others. So these are the key skills that you need within the job. And I'm going to post this. I think this is the key area I want you to focus on. What do you need for an interview? What do you need to prepare for one? And also what you need to do or to prepare for a job as well. So just focus on those areas, but also remember what transferable skills you need to take you from one area to another. I'm very conscious of time and the fact that I started about 15 minutes later than expected. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to stop there and I'm going to ask, are there any questions?
Thanks, Nadine. It's Jill here. My question is, now you've ended up in tech. Would you, if you could do it all again, would you have wanted to change anything in your career?
Yes, I probably would have done a degree in psychology. I probably would have worked as an educational psychologist, but I probably would have still ended up in tech, if I'm to be honest with you, because the technology as it is today was not available then. And that's the point I'm trying to make to all of you youngsters out there is you start off doing one role, you can end up doing something very different. What is most important is the transferable skills that you have.
Right.
Really, I think Nadine, this is Gaurav. Thank you. This is great talk. It reminds me of a great session that Steve Jobs did when he had his convocation speech at Stanford, and he talked about connecting the dots. And he talked about how different dots, when he looked back in his past, after the fact that he is now able to look back and connect the dots and see how each one of those dots made him what he ended up being, whatever he became in the end, right? So he took an example of how in his youth, right after his college, he ended up working in calligraphy, right? So he had no idea what he will do. He had no idea about Apple. He had no idea about anything, right? He learned how to write good fonts. That's it. And people of his age and his peers used to make fun of him because that was a very funny job at that time, right? So people used to work in computers. Had started to work in computers, but doing lots of different things. But nobody did calligraphy. And he spent time on that. And then when he founded Apple, one of the first fonts, one of the most famous fonts, which eventually Windows copied, came from Steve Jobs when he actually wrote that style of that font himself. And then he was giving that example of how these dots shaped his career, his future. And listening to you talk about these things kind of reminded me of that chat that he had. Thank you so much for that.
Thank you. And I agree. I think for whatever age you are, your life is a journey and it has twists and turns. And don't think because you start off doing something that's where you're going to end up. And it's up to you to focus on what you want to do and then set your mind about how you're going to achieve it. Often we say that person didn't help me with this, that, and the other. People can help you, but what's more important is how you evaluate yourself to focus and reflect and move forward. Are there any other questions? I'm just conscious of time.
Just a quick one, actually, Nadine. You made me laugh when you said don't practice what I preach in terms of putting your picture on your CV, because I'm of the same generation, I think, when it was knocking on doors and physically delivering CVs. But I'm really appreciative of what you've just shared, because my children, well, they're not children anymore, they're both in higher education. And one thing, they're very good on social media, absolutely savvy with that. But when I mention Excel to them, they sort of go, oh, and that's the sort of case in point about what you said about having the base, well, more than the basics, but those transferable skills. Unfortunately, despite COVID, my daughter's managed to avoid helping me with a bit of Excel database inputting, which is sort of, a contentious point with the pair of us at the moment, but nevertheless. And the other thing, just very briefly, I'm absolutely amazed about this Shine new technology for video conferencing. I mean, that's scary for me, but really, really useful information for youngsters, or young people, should I say. I got corrected the other day by my daughter. Apparently you're not supposed to refer to them as youngsters, but she's at that university stage. So, but no, really interesting. So thank you for that. That was very, very informative, and actually amazing to do so well as a woman in technology. I mean, I studied biotechnology, environmental biotechnology back in the day, which was still mostly a male-orientated industry. And from a female perspective, I've always felt it be quite a challenge as a woman, even today. But so congratulations on, doing what you've done. It's incredible to be part of the startup of 3 and where you are now. It's amazing. So thank you very much.
No, thank you very much. And what I would say to you, Sarah, going back to your daughter, it's really important that she actually learns Excel skills, because the roles and the jobs of the future, which I didn't have time to talk about, will actually be about being able to analyze data very quickly. They are the future. So from that perspective, if you can switch her on that way, I think it would be really useful for her. Even my daughter, who's just turned 19 and is at university too, is realizing that now and is signed up for a number of courses to do that.
Yeah, that's brilliant. I'm going to actually send her a copy of this video, so make her watch it. So thank you. Thank you for that, Nadine.
Thank you very much, Sarah. Is there anything else from anyone else?
Just a quick one, Nadine.
Okay. Hi, Raj.
Firstly, a very useful talk. Many will benefit. Would be interested to know if there are any further talks that will be coming up from you.
From me personally, I hadn't thought about it, but from 3 there will be. The next talk from 3 is coming from Jill Cook, who is even more interesting than I am. I can assure you of that.
Thank you.
Okay.
Hi Nadine, brilliant talk. I'm Kevin in year 11. I was looking for advice on how you would go about looking for internships in different companies.
Right. So that's a really good question, Kevin. I think in the past, I would advise you to go and knock on their door. But now, actually, a lot of these organizations, if you go into their LinkedIn site, so do a search in LinkedIn, a lot of these companies are actually advertising any apprenticeships they've got via LinkedIn. I'd also still say to you, use the traditional route of the career service because there still is a plug in there, but use the internet more, use LinkedIn, find out, Kevin, what type of company do you want to work in? Where do you see yourself long term? What is it that's important to you? Then target those particular organizations via their LinkedIn site, or you can even via Glassdoor get access, find out who their HR people are, and then target those individuals and say you're interested.
Okay, thank you very much.
Anything else from anyone else?
Hello Nadine, I really loved your talk, thank you. I have a question. I was just wondering, do you have any tips on how to choose a course in university?
Yes, most people choose courses based on long term. Do you know what you want to do long term or not?
I haven't, no, not really, not right now.
Okay. Do you know what you enjoy doing?
Electronics.
You like doing electronics. So this is what I'd advise you to do. And this is really basic. I wish I had more time with you. Sit down at home, write a list of all the things that you enjoy doing, list why you enjoy doing them, then list what you think you can get out of them. If you enjoy doing something that's electronically based, then look at things like mechanical engineering, electrical engineering, but that's too generic. What is it about electronics you like? Is it the mathematical content? Is it learning more about the technology? Because if you start to delve more into your own knowledge base, that will help you think about, right, what do I need to do next? Because do I need to do mechanical engineering, or is it just plain maths I'm interested in? Because I just enjoy it for the pure science. So I've been very basic today. These are the questions you need to ask yourself. Write it down on a piece of paper and just write down all the skills and all the things that you're good at. And then ask your parents maybe, what is it about that I like? Why do I like that? That will help you when thinking about choosing a university. That's something I did with my own daughter.
Okay, thank you so much, Nadine.
Anything else from anyone else? And good luck.
That's great. Thank you.
All right. So
Thanks, Nadine.
Okay, I've gone over my time limit now. Thank you all so much for listening to an old timer, as I call myself, on today. I've really enjoyed it, and I really hope that I've helped at least one person out there. If I have, then I've really enjoyed this. So thank you very much, and hopefully I look forward to seeing you soon, maybe talking about something slightly different. Speak to you soon. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye. Bye. Thanks.